P-Diddy back in court again, this time for his sentencing. His attorneys are attempting to get the minor charges that he was convicted of thrown out. Take a listen.
Back in court today in an effort to have his guilty verdict overthrown. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman reports this comes as Combs faces sentencing next week for 2 charges related to prostitution.
Sean Combs is back in court for the first time since the day of his verdict. Now, Sean Combs ended up being convicted of 2 charges. Those were transportation for the purpose of prostitution charges. He was let off on the more severe charges of sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. But even with these lesser charges, Combs' attorneys have been arguing that those convictions should be thrown out, or that there should be a new trial if the judge is not willing to do that. This is a hearing on the post-trial motions. The judge is listening to arguments from the parties on these issues. What Combs' attorneys say is that this is an unprecedented use of the Mann Act, the federal law that makes it illegal to transport people across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. They say that these were consenting adults having sex, and that this Mann Act has never been used in this way for conviction. Now, if the judge won't throw out the convictions, they say that a new trial is necessary because of the severe spillover prejudice from reams of inflammatory evidence that was related to those other charges that Combs was ultimately not found guilty on. There is a very high bar for throwing out a jury verdict. So we will see what the judge ends up deciding today, and we will keep you updated. Back to you.
Katrina Kaufman, thank you.
Happened back in July. He was found guilty on 2 charges related to prostitution, which each carry a maximum of 10 years behind bars. So let's go live to CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman. You were there at the hearing. So what did you see and hear in the courtroom?
Hi, Reed. So essentially what the defense is trying to do is to get Sean Combs acquitted on those 2 charges that he was convicted of. Those are transportation for prostitution charges. They're under the Mann Act, which is the federal law that he was convicted under. But what the defense says is that they actually, for one, argue, Reed, with how prostitution is being defined here. They say that Sean Combs wasn't making any money, that this is not similar to other Mann Act convictions where really it involves more of a pimp who was profiting off of the sexual activity that was happening with the transportation. So for them, that is a threshold issue. They also say, Reed, that there's a First Amendment issue here, that this is just commercial voyeurism. Sean Combs was, they said, a producer of amateur porn and a consumer of amateur porn. They talked about how in court we learned how he wanted these lit a certain way, how sometimes there were wigs, costumes involved. So they're sort of describing this almost as though this is an amateur porn production. They say this should be protected speech, not something that can be a Mann Act conviction, Read. So for all of these reasons, they say these convictions should be thrown out. The prosecution disagrees. For one, they say that some of these arguments are being brought too late, Read, that they should have been brought during pre-trial motions, not after the conviction. They also say that there are important government interests here, such as regulating porn is important to discourage sexual violence against women, as well as drug use, other issues that they say were in fact core to this case that we heard about from witnesses like Sean Combs' ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, and Jane, another ex-girlfriend who testified. We heard about violence that happened behind those closed doors, how they were given drugs to perform in these activities with him. And even though he was not ultimately convicted on these sex trafficking charges, they say that these are still important issues here, and the government wants to protect women in this way.
Well, Diddy and his attorney said that they would fight to the bitter end. It looks like that will be the case. So regardless of this ruling, what do you expect to happen next week at the court hearing?
Well, so the judge was very careful at the end of today, Reed. He said that we will get a decision shortly, and then depending on what that is, he may see us all back in the courtroom about a week from now. Next Friday is when the sentencing is scheduled for. And as you said earlier, he faces potentially up to 10 years in prison for each of these charges. That is very unlikely. The defense is asking for up to 14 months. And now, Reed, what that would mean is by next Friday, Sean Combs will have almost served about a year of time already. So they're saying that he has already been punished enough here. He has had reputational damage. He is in detention on suicide watch right now. His family has also been damaged by this, and really he should only have a couple more months of time to serve. The prosecution is still submitting their sentencing guidelines, but that will be much greater. The probation report gave up to about 7 years of potential prison time for him. So we will have to see how all of this plays out. After court, Sean Combs did gather with his family and friends for about 10 minutes. He told them how much he appreciates their support during all of this, Reed, and how he's hoping to come home soon.
All right, standing there in the rain with a honking New York City and the notes in her hand, Katrina Kaufman, always great to talk to you.